In the late summer of 1683, the fate of Europe hung by a thread. The armies of the Ottoman Empire, once the most powerful military force on earth, stood before the gates of Vienna, the glittering capital of the Habsburg Empire. Behind its crumbling walls, a desperate garrison of soldiers, citizens, and priests prepared for their final hour. For 2 months, they had fought starvation, disease, and relentless bombardment. Cannon fire thundered day and night. The mighty crescent banner of Islam fluttered over the hills that encircled the doomed city, and the muezzin's call to prayer echoed across the blood-soaked plains. To the defenders of Christendom, it felt like the end of the world. Europe had been here before. Cities burned, kingdoms fell, and empires shattered before the relentless might of the Ottomans. But this time, something was different. Because far beyond the horizon, a secret weapon was coming, a weapon that would crush the Ottoman dream of conquering Europe once and for all, and change the course of history forever. The story of the Battle of Vienna is not just the story of armies and empires, it is the story of civilization at its breaking point, a story of faith, courage, betrayal, and redemption. For over 3 centuries, the Ottoman Empire had expanded like a storm from the east. From the deserts of Arabia to the gates of Budapest, it had swept aside kingdoms and humbled empires. The mighty walls of Constantinople had fallen in 1453 to Mehmed the Conqueror's cannons. The Balkans were enslaved, Hungary crushed, and the Mediterranean trembled before the Sultan's fleets. By the 17th century, the Ottomans were no longer content with holding the East. They wanted all of Europe, and standing in their way was Vienna, the last great fortress before the heart of the continent. In 1682, Sultan Mehmed IV gave the order. The time had come to destroy the Habsburgs and march on Rome. The Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha, was entrusted with command of the largest Ottoman army seen in a century. An army of nearly 200,000 men, including elite janissaries, battle-hardened sipahis, and countless auxiliaries. It was a force so vast that it seemed unstoppable. The Ottomans believed the conquest of Vienna would open the road to Germany, France, and beyond. The Sultan himself promised to pray in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. To many Europeans, it seemed that the apocalypse was at hand. By the spring of 1683, Kara Mustafa's army marched across the plains of Hungary, crushing all resistance. Towns surrendered without a fight. Others were reduced to ashes. On July 14th, his host appeared before the walls of Vienna. The defenders numbered fewer than 15,000 soldiers, a tiny force commanded by Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a stubborn and fearless Austrian nobleman. Vienna's walls were strong, but aging. Its supplies were limited and its people terrified. The Ottomans surrounded the city, cutting it off completely. They dug trenches, built batteries, and unleashed an endless barrage of artillery. Soon, the earth shook with every blast. The siege of Vienna had begun, and with it, the greatest showdown between East and West since the Crusades. For weeks, the city endured a living nightmare. Ottoman sappers tunneled under the walls, packing explosives to create breaches. Every night, explosions ripped through the defenses, sending masonry and bodies flying. The defenders fought back desperately, filling gaps, launching sorties and praying for deliverance. Inside the city, food grew scarce, disease spread, corpses piled in the streets. Starhemberg himself was wounded, yet refused to surrender. His message to the besiegers was simple: "We will fight to the last drop of blood." Meanwhile, Europe watched in horror. Many rulers hesitated, fearing to face the Ottomans directly, but one man refused to let Vienna fall. King John III, Sobieski of Poland, a soldier king, strategist, and devout Catholic. He understood that the fall of Vienna would mean the fall of Christendom itself. In secret councils, he swore to ride to Vienna's aid, whatever the cost. He rallied his forces, a Polish army of roughly 27,000 men, including the most feared cavalry in Europe, the Polish Winged Hussars. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were the elite of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, armored knights mounted on powerful horses, bearing long lances and wearing wings of eagle feathers that whistled as they charged. They were Europe's last true cavalry, symbols of defiance in an age dominated by gunpowder and cannon. To the Ottomans, they would become the secret weapon they never saw coming. But Sobieski would not ride alone. Through diplomacy and faith, a grand alliance was forged. The Holy League. German, Austrian and Bavarian forces gathered under the imperial banner. Though outnumbered, these Christian armies united for one last stand. The stage was set for one of the greatest battles in history. By early September, Vienna was on the brink of collapse. The Ottomans had breached parts of the wall. Smoke rose from burning districts. The defenders had only days left. Then, on September 11th, the Allied army arrived on the hills of the Kahlenberg, overlooking the city. Their combined force numbered around 70,000 men, still fewer than the Ottoman host below. Kara Mustafa was confident. He believed he could destroy this relief army before it could reach the city. But he had made a fatal mistake. For weeks, he had allowed his men to spread across miles of siege works, their discipline eroded by success. His army was scattered, exhausted, and overconfident. The Ottomans were at the height of their power and completely unprepared for what was about to descend upon them. At dawn on September 12, 1683, the Christian coalition began its assault. The battle opened with artillery fire and infantry clashes along the Ottoman lines. Imperial troops under Duke Charles of Lorraine attacked from the left, drawing the Turks' attention. On the right, German and Bavarian regiments advanced through forested terrain, driving back Ottoman flanks. All morning, the battle raged. The Ottomans counterattacked furiously, their janissaries fighting with deadly skill. Yet for every breakthrough they achieved, the coalition pushed them back. Slowly, the Christian armies crept down the slopes toward the plains. By late afternoon, the Ottoman camp was under pressure. Then came the moment that would decide history. From the heights above Vienna, John Sobieski surveyed the battlefield. He had held his cavalry in reserve, thousands of horsemen waiting for the perfect moment. As the sun began to set, he gave the order. With a thunderous cry, the Polish Winged Hussars began their descent. Alongside them rode German cuirassiers and Austrian cavalry, forming the largest cavalry charge ever recorded in European history. Over 20,000 horsemen thundering downhill in unison. Witnesses described the sound as an earthquake. The ground shook as steel and flesh collided. The hussars' lances shattered Ottoman ranks like glass. The wings on their backs, whistling through the air, struck terror into the hearts of the enemy. The janissaries tried to hold their ground, but they were swept aside in minutes. The entire Ottoman front collapsed. Panic spread. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled. Sobieski himself led the charge straight into Kara Mustafa's camp, his saber flashing in the fading light. By nightfall, the siege was broken. The Ottomans were in full retreat. Vienna was saved. The victory was total. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers lay dead or captured. Their cannons, banners and treasure were seized. Kara Mustafa Pasha fled with the remnants of his army, humiliated and broken. When he returned to the Ottoman capital, he was executed by the Sultan, strangled with a silk cord, the traditional punishment for failure. The might of the Ottoman Empire had been shattered, and it would never recover its former power. The siege of Vienna marked not just a victory, but a turning point in history, the beginning of the end for Ottoman expansion into Europe. So what was the secret weapon that destroyed the Ottoman army? Some would say it was John Sobieski himself, his leadership, his courage, his timing. Others would point to the Polish Winged Hussars. the unstoppable cavalry whose charge changed the fate of nations. But in truth, the secret weapon was something far greater: unity. For the first time in centuries, Europe had put aside its rivalries and stood together against a common enemy. The combined strength of Poland, Austria, and the German states proved that even the mightiest empire could fall when its opponents stood united in purpose and faith. After the battle, the world changed. Vienna became the symbol of European resistance. The Ottoman dream of conquering the West died on that field. Over the next decades, the Habsburgs pushed the Turks out of Hungary, reclaiming lands lost for generations. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, though later weakened by politics, was immortalized in legend for its role in saving Europe. John III Sobieski was hailed as the savior of Christendom. When he entered Vienna after the battle, he knelt in St. Stephen's Cathedral and offered a prayer of thanks, quoting Julius Caesar, "Veni, vidi, Deus vicit." I came, I saw, God conquered. But beyond the glory and the legend, the Battle of Vienna revealed a deeper truth about the fall of empires. The Ottomans had once seemed invincible, their armies disciplined, their strategies unstoppable, their faith unshakable. Yet by 1683, they had grown complacent, weighed down by internal corruption, arrogance, and political decay. Their commanders fought for glory, not strategy. Their sultan lived in luxury, far removed from the realities of war. When they faced a united, adaptive, and desperate enemy, their empire cracked. The siege of Vienna exposed the limits of Ottoman power and the beginning of Europe's rise. In the years that followed, the balance of power shifted dramatically. The Holy League continued the offensive. At Mohacs in 1687 and Zenta in 1697, the Ottomans suffered more crushing defeats. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 forced them to surrender vast territories. The empire that had once terrorized Europe was now retreating step by step, year by year. The Christian world, once on the brink of annihilation, surged forward into a new age, the age of gunpowder, enlightenment, and empire. The Battle of Vienna also carried symbolic weight. It marked the end of medieval warfare and the dawn of modern strategy. The Polish Winged Hussars represented the last great charge of Europe's knightly tradition, a fusion of faith, discipline, and sheer power. Their success inspired military leaders for generations. Even centuries later, military historians study their tactics, discipline, and courage as a lesson in leadership. The image of thousands of cavalrymen charging down the Kellenberg became an enduring symbol of Europe's survival. Yet for all its heroism, the battle was also a tragedy. Tens of thousands of lives were lost on both sides. Vienna lay in ruins, its people scarred forever. The Ottoman soldiers, brave and loyal, had fought with valor, but paid the ultimate price for their leader's ambition. The battle ended an era, the last time the Ottoman crescent would threaten the heart of Europe. But it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in world history, where Europe would soon become the conqueror, not the conquered. When the dust settled and the fires of war faded, the story of Vienna became legend. For centuries afterward, Europeans would remember that day, the day the East met the West in one final clash for supremacy. And at the heart of that story stands a single truth. No empire, no matter how powerful, can stand forever against a people united in faith and determination. The Battle of Vienna was more than a victory. It was a rebirth. It proved that courage, strategy, and unity could overcome even the greatest of odds. And it showed that sometimes the most powerful weapon of all is not forged from steel, but from conviction. The Ottomans came to conquer Europe. Instead, they awakened it. The siege that was meant to destroy the West instead gave birth to its greatest age. The secret weapon that destroyed the Ottoman army was not just cavalry, cannons, or courage. It was the human spirit refusing to yield, even in the face of certain death. In the twilight of that September evening, as the Polish banners fluttered above Vienna and the cries of victory echoed through the shattered streets, the world had changed. The crescent banner retreated into the east. The cross still stood over Europe. And from that day forward, the Ottoman Empire would never again threaten the heart of the continent. The siege of Vienna was over, and with it, the legend of Ottoman invincibility was gone forever.